The Mole was written by Peter Werner back in 2013 or so, and it follows Winston Bates as he works in Washington DC as a spy for the Canadian intelligence. Yeah, that's the book in a nutshell. It currently stands at about 3 out of 5 on Goodreads, but only with about 50 or so ratings, so you should probably take it as you want, like with a big grain of salt. From what I can tell, Warner, the author, doesn't really have a background in history. He did have a background in like literature and the arts, but not in history. So he did work as an editor before becoming an author. So a lot of research went into this book to like create this piece of speculative fiction. But first, talk about the cover. I freaking love it. It's so good. Like, look at this cover. It's perfect in every freaking way. Like, it's about being part of the book. Is about being a member of the CIA and working, well, not technically the CIA, but a subcommittee overseeing the CIA. So kind of working for the CIA in a way, / working, like having CIA work for you. And it's just like, it's such a good cover. Like, of course everything's gonna be edited out. It's like, there's the declassified version, and it's like, oh right, great, I got 4 words, great, very declassified. And it just, what I'm sad about is the backside didn't quite stick to it. Like, they wanted these long quotes, and honestly, should just been placed here under the author description, or, well, I guess they couldn't really do it here, but yeah, on that. If you remove the dust cover, it's a fairly innocuous book to look at actually, and I like that. Like, it's just pure black, and then silver detailing on the spine. That's it. And it works well for a CIA-based book, especially because it is definitely meant for having the dust cover on it. But I love the cover. I think the premise is interesting. So let's talk the first section and see if it actually is interesting. For the first part, you have a and a B plot going, and it works in a way, but it's also a little weird because it's definitely like one of them is better than the other. So let's start with what we call the A plot or the main plot, and that follows. I'm looking at my script here because I can't remember. So the A plot follows Winston Bates as he's working, well, he tries to work for the American government in Washington DC, while also being a sleeper agent for the Canadian intelligence. Really all he has to do is work for the government. He doesn't have to work in a specific agency, he doesn't have to raise for a higher rank, they just want him to work, and if they're gonna need something from him, they'll just ask him questions. So really that's all. But due to him having a photographic memory, he gets to work, gets into subcommittee working with, overseeing the CIA, and he gets to work for Senator Russell, where he's also then revealed for the U-2 spy plane program, and especially the Suez Canal, the entire thing down there that happened. What I love about this section, not about this A plot, is how we get to see how politics actually works behind the scenes, because it's not going to be people sitting around the table. It's a lot of knowing the right guys, going to the right cocktail parties, learning what rumors and behind the scenes things actually happens. And so Winston of course starts going to these low tier cocktail parties where most of the talk is just these rumors and speculations, but as he's meeting higher up and he gets invited to them, we get to see this is where the deals actually happen, and no one's invited to specific cocktails by accident. It's not, oh, we'd like to see you. No, there's a reason you're there. So usually when writing a story, you want your main character to have somewhat of a personality, which Winston categorically lacks a lot, quite a bit. And for better or worse, he lacks it. It works for his strength in this book, because it allows all the other characters to shine. Because there's a lot. Like the gallery in this book is enormous, but that's fine. Because we don't need to remember most of them. Most of them are not one-off characters, but they are just kinda almost. And all we just need to know is, and we get reminded that every time we meet them, is who they are. And Winston just needs to take a step back and recall things for us, because this is written as him telling us what happened back then. So really we're just reading his memories, and that works perfectly fine. Now, the B plot follows Winston right after World War II, where he lives in Paris and trying to make it as a poet, where he meets different people and even a couple who wants to publish his poems. While going to cocktail parties, he also visits the Canadian embassy a lot to get free food, basically. And then he's recruited to work as a Canadian courier because he's spending all of his money on this poem book that he once published. So he needs the extra money instead of what he just had saved up. And he's then, after having done some work as a courier, he's then recruited to work as a spy because he wants out of Paris, and that's great. And so the B plot explores how in the late 40s, early 50s Paris was, and how people were, and we're seeing this resurgence in the arts, especially the liberal arts, and that's kind of what we get to see here. The B plot isn't nearly as good as the A plot, and I think due to the length of the book, the B plot might actually be a bit better spread out throughout the entire book, because putting it in the first part here is kind of in my opinion. It's a little weak, but oh well, I digress. It was still good, and the A plot were amazing, and the amount of work Warner had to go through it, out of this world, so good. The B plot, not so much. But so far, if you're a history buff with an interest in the Cold War, but not just the Cuba crisis, all the times when we went to war, but actually what happened, or what probably happened behind the scenes. This is a great book so far. Now let's get and see section 2. Talking about section 2, this section really does not have an A or B plot. It has an A plot and that's it, and it's great. Now, talking about it, so it follows Winston as he's currently working on the U2 spy program, especially the Russians part, and we meet so many people, insane. I thought we met a lot of people in the first section, but we meet so many. And here's the thing, I might need a whiteboard and a red line to figure out who's who and how they're connected. But that's great, it's fun, and it kind of adds to the overall sense of confusion that the American government were at this time, because that's what we learned, is everything's just one big confusing mess. So, Winston works with the U2 program, and he especially works with the Russians part, and everybody's the Russians will never shoot it down, we're good, it's fine, and he's like, what if they are? What if they're developing long-range missiles and just hiding it behind the space program? And everybody's just like, nah, no. And then, oh shit, the Russians are. But here's the fun thing. He gets so upset, invested in this, that Senator Russell loses faith in him, and he needs to prove he's correct to keep his status. His status is in jeopardy because of himself. So, then when the Russians actually, do shoot down the plane, everybody's kind of forced to admit that Winston were correct. So, Now, afterwards, we follow as as we follow the Kennedy presidential period, especially with the attack on Cuba, specifically the Bay of Pigs attacks, and how not great, how not wonderful at all it went. It went horrible, as most people know. And here's the thing. You're not reading this book to learn about the U2 program, to learn about the Bay of Pigs. You're reading this book to learn what probably contributed to the failure of the Bay of Pigs, what contributed to the CIA and the naval, the Navy being so overconfident. All of this, that's what you want to learn, is what were possibly going on there, like you want the speculative fiction in here, and it feels really realistic, and feels like that's probably what happened. And I could imagine one has been reading a lot of declassified documents to like try and figure out from notes and memos like what happened. As I read more of this book though, I can say it gets better. Like Winston gets more time to shine as a person now because we only have one plot. I love that we spent more time on the politics than the action in Guatemala. I think the Guatemala action was fine and fun and all, but honestly it's the politics you're reading this book for. You're not reading it for the action. The book isn't an action spy book like James Bond or something. It's a memoir of a spy who is like just there. Like he's not even an active spy. Most of the time he's genuinely working, trying to better the things he's doing. So finally, I think Winston gets a wake-up call. Because in section 1 it ended with him being correct about the Suez Canal and that entire situation. And here he learns that sometimes, maybe just because you might know what's going on, maybe it's better to just shut it. Like, because you're gonna influence too much, you shouldn't play guard and wait for a right time. Either you tell or you don't. And generally I think for section 3 we need Winston to be taken down a few notches. And yeah, I would like that, especially since the next section is called The Fool, so it can only be great. This section is wild, like so much is going on. So let's just bullet point it down what's happening. So Winston now works for President Johnson. Due to his memory, Johnson uses him as a showpiece basically, while Winston trying to figure out as much about the Vietnam War as possible to feed to the Canadian intelligence. And we're looking at the start of the Vietnam War. It's before the Americans go full Fortunate Son on Vietnam. And Winston finds out Gardner is a spy. His friend Gardner is a spy too, and he assumes he's a Canadian spy by how Gardner answers his questions. And so he starts feeding Gardner information that he can then deliver onward to the Canadian intelligence. However, Gardner is actually an involuntary informant for the KGB. So Winston, being the fool, that's where the section name comes, is actually just feeding the KGB the plans of the US in Vietnam, and it's probably why the US had such a problem and had to go full on in. Now, oh boy. Even though a lot happened, I don't actually have that much to say because it went really fast, like just a snap, and then it felt a little too fast at times, really. But it was also really great because we got to see really how easily spying worked. And I bet you in some of the other subcommittees and committees, we probably have the same mistakes being made by the KGB towards the Americans in some capacity. So really it's just showing us how easy spying technically is by just talking, knowing the right people. So yeah. Now, it's setting up for the final part where hopefully Winston will take on the Vietnam War from an office in Washington DC, but we'll see. So let's get to part 4. Oh boy, Warner really dropped the ball on this one, a lot. This was so bad reading, because it went from being a political drama memoir to just Winston being all I'm sad, I made a mistake with the Vietnam War and now I can't do anything. It's just, we get so much more of his personal life, and really that's actually quite boring for this story. We don't want more Winston, we want more of Winston on the war. So yeah, so it's a huge letdown when comparing to the previous sections, and I would love to have learned more at how at home Deborah wanted him to try to intervene in the war while working working in the war, him trying to maybe just influence some people into not going all Fortunate Son on Vietnam, but at the same time he's shouldn't really do it because he's more just a secretary at best. So it's and then the only really good thing about this section, and it isn't even the section, it's the it's the afterword, where we learn like why this book was written. It was basically Winston doing it out of spite from some young hotshot who came and basically took the job he had before. So, and we only learn that he goes to work and not what happens at work, and it's a big shame. So yeah, let's get to the conclusion. Where do I start? Like, I don't think I've reviewed a book that dropped the ball this much. Like, the first 3 parts of this is like borderline must read, and then we get to the 4th part and it's just like blah, it's bad. So should you read this book? The first 3 parts, if you're a history buff, definitely. The last part, no. Yes. Like, it makes it hard to recommend this book when you know that Warner just sadly drops the ball so hard. On the other hand, it's like, it's such a good book otherwise. So, yeah. Well, I would say yeah, but keep in mind the 4th section is really not. I would say required reading, but that's wrong. It's not recommended reading. So read. I would recommend part 1, 2, and 3, but not 4. Alright. If you like this, leave a like and a comment. If you want more, subscribe. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you think of the book. Have you read it? Are you gonna read it? And also, if you want me to read and review a specific book, let me know. If you have ideas for books you want me to find, because I'm working on a lot of those, let me know. And yeah, just if you have any feedback, let me know. Any comments, let me know.